Hello and welcome back to the Google Workspace Update podcast from Strawberry 7. My name is Adam.
And my name is Adam.
We're here every week to bring you all of the latest updates happening in the world of Google Workspace. This podcast is available in audio format from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7.
Coming up on the show today,
we've got 9 updates for you today, so quite a packed show. So I've said to Adam beforehand, we can't go off on a tangent, so we'll see how that goes. We've got updates to Google Drive, Groups, Calendar, Docs, another one to Docs, Chat, Alert Center, Sheets, and then Calendar and Docs in one update. And we've got some really nice stuff this week. As always, there is a link to the document that we read from, which is in the podcast or the video description. This contains some more detailed information, relevant links, some great pictures, and even some moving graphics showing you these features in action. So let's get to it.
On with the show. Right, so as Adam just said, there's a little bit more than just the one singular update that we had last week. But first up this week, we have a Google Drive update. So Google is updating the storage model in Business Starter from per user storage to pooled storage. Pooled storage provides a more simple and flexible way to manage storage, as well as storage is shared across the organization, removing the need to manage it on a per-user basis. With pooled storage, admins also have more tools to monitor how storage is used across their organization. In the coming days, new customers signing up for Business Starter will have pooled storage. Existing Business Starter customers will transition to pooled storage over the coming months. As an added benefit of pooled storage, organizations with Business Starter will soon gain access to shared drives. Users will be able to create shared drives and add members, files, and folders, but please note that certain admin level and security controls, such as the ability to control access to items within the shared drive, will not be included in shared drives for Business Starter. So to me, that kind of sounds like you'll have access to shared drives. You can make everybody have access to your shared drives, but you can't change permissions on a slightly more granular level. So everybody will have access to everything within that shared drive. You can't say everyone has access to the first level, but a folder within that shared drive, only certain admins can have access. Pooled storage is a simple and flexible model for sharing storage across an organization, and it enables admins to more easily manage storage across their organization. Part of empowering Google's customers to do their best work means reducing the friction around file sharing and collaboration. Shared drives are a key tool for collaboration, where users can store, search, and access their team's files instantly. Additionally, they offer benefits such as having things be easily discoverable, so you spend less time requesting access to files or searching for relevant documents with all of your team's files in one place. There's also your files are forever, so all content stays put, so even when a collaborator or team member leaves, all of the content stays the same. We've had that issue before, so this is a very good way of avoiding that. Easy collaboration, so every member of a shared drive can explore and collaborate within the same files. You can also add users outside of your team or organization, so that can be quite handy. And it's accessible anywhere, so regardless of location or device, you can always access files you need the most. So to be honest, that last one, that's kind of the same with Google Drive anyway, but they've thrown it in there.
Yeah, they've sort of done a bit of an Apple there of including a feature that's already there but making it a new thing. I mean, this is quite a straightforward update for anybody, certainly anybody who's familiar with pooled storage. There's some links in the document to sort of go into more detail about pooled storage, but as Adam's described there, it's basically just one big load of storage for all of your users rather than everybody having their own sort of set amount of storage. We found with these pooled storage limits, they're very, very high. I think it's like 2 terabytes or something. It's quite interesting, and it doesn't actually go into how much storage is on here. Maybe it's sort of in the more detailed part of the pooled storage document, but it doesn't talk about it directly in the update here. But certainly I think I've seen it around about that sort of figure in business standard anyway, which I assume it's going to be a similar level. So, some people might even see that they've got a bit more storage than they had before.
I have a feeling, unless I've got my wires crossed, I'm thinking of the wrong model. Isn't the storage limit 100 terabytes, not 2?
I don't know if it's that high. It might be. I'm pretty sure on business standard. I mean,
okay, for our schools, it's definitely 100 terabytes.
Yeah, I think for schools it's a bit higher. I don't pay too much attention to it on our standard subscription because I just know we're nowhere near it. For anybody listening as well who's not that familiar with pooled storage, just to let you know, pooled storage does, from my understanding, include not just your drive files but also your email boxes as well. So it's worth bearing that in mind, that when it's talking about pooled storage, it's not just pooled between all of the different users, but it's pooled between the different applications within Google within Google Workspace as well. So that includes Drive and email and various things like that. So that is worth bearing in mind, just in case you've got one user who's got about a terabyte in their mailbox or something like that.
I just checked very quickly. So for mine, so obviously we're on a business tier. That it tells me how much storage I've used, whereas education customers, it always says this much of 100 terabytes. So I can't actually see at a glance what our limit is. I'm sure we could find out if we needed to, but I just noticed that difference.
Yeah, I've just had a little look here, Adam, and it says we've got 14 terabytes. So,
plenty.
But that is business standard. Hence the reason I've never looked at it, because we're only using about 100 gig or something. So it's worth bearing that in mind for pooled storage. And I think this is an interesting step forward. The most interesting thing to me here is the fact that business starter customers are going to have access to shared drives. Even with that restriction around permissions, the fact that they're going to have access to shared drives is very interesting. Again, for anybody unfamiliar, one of the main differences of shared drives is what Adam said there about the fact that they put it under files are forever. I think they've kind of worded that in a bit of a weird Google way.
It's essentially the ownership. There is no one owner of the shared drive or of the folder. So previously it would just be a folder that has been shared, but somebody would be the owner of that folder and then share it out with all your teammates or whoever. With shared drives, there is no one owner of the shared drive.
Absolutely, Adam. Yep, you've absolutely sort of said it there. So the thing is, when having an owner of files, say it's in their My Drive and they share it out to their teammates, if they leave and the admin doesn't transfer the ownership, which is what Adam was alluding to earlier, where we've been caught out by that at school, then if the ownership isn't transferred, then those files just disappear, basically. It just goes. So that's an important difference. And I would say to anybody, unless you've got a very specific use case, like we have some specific use cases at the school, I would best use shared drives rather than sharing stuff out from your My Drive. It's certainly the way that Google would like you to do it. Could you tell us how to get started with this, Adam? What the rollout pace is, and I'm guessing the availability is business starter because it's only talking about them.
Okay, so getting started for the admins, I've added a link to Google's Help Center. You can learn more about setting storage limits and shared drives. If you need more storage for your organization, you could consider purchasing additional pooled storage or upgrading your Google Workspace edition with a plan that has more storage. And just a note on that, resold customers should contact their reseller to purchase more storage or upgrade their edition. For their end users, there's no end user impact or action required at this time, Google says ominously. So with the rollout for this, so this was beginning on May 15th, new business starter customers will have pooled storage by default. So from now, pooled storage will start rolling out to existing business starter customers on May the 22nd, 2023, and continue over the coming months. So they've not really said it will happen to everybody immediately. It definitely sounds like it's going to be a gradual thing. Shared drives will become available after pooled storage rolls out to all existing business starter customers. And this update is going to be available to Google Workspace business starter customers.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you, Adam. Anybody listening who wants to make that transition as well, if you do want to go from My Drive to shared drives, then we can help you with that. You know, we've done that for customers before where they've made that transition across from either personal drives to then business drives, or just even within their organisation. So if you need any help with that, then by all means do contact us. Thank you, Adam. What have you got next?
Up next, everybody that would like to get in contact us, info@strawberry7.com. Up next, we have a Google Groups update. So new membership limits for Google Groups. So as a security measure, the Google Groups for Business service has limits for message activity, group size, invitations, and membership. Now, Google is increasing the limits for the number of direct and indirect group memberships for which a user can have. So the direct memberships is increasing from 2,000 to 3,000, and combined direct and indirect is increasing from 5,000 to 7,500 memberships. That's quite a busy group, to be honest. I've not seen anyone half the size of that, but apparently there's a need for this update. If you're the owner or manager of a group, it counts as 2 memberships, so bear in mind you're going to lose 2 out of your potentially 7,500 memberships. So as one of the group members and also one as the owner or manager, a user is an indirect member of the group if they belong to a different group that's nested within the group. Increasing these memberships limits gives Google's customers more flexibility to scale and manage the use of groups, especially to those with complex group structures.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting sort of increase here, potentially going to be useful for those very, very big organisations. And it's good that Google's pointed out and clarified what an indirect member of a group is as well, saying that it's nested within. I can imagine that maybe even more than the fact that it's increased the direct members from 2 to 3,000, the 7,500 might actually be more relevant with those nested groups, because, you know, if you've got a big organisation, then I can imagine that you maybe are approaching that sort of limit there. Certainly the one that was previously there of 5,000. Yeah, I think it's possibly going to be useful for some people in some big organisations there, and nice to see that Google are taking that into account. How do people get started with this? What's the rollout pace, and who's this available for, Adam?
Okay, so to get started, there's no end-user action required. So this update, it's more of a notification just to let you know this has happened, so nobody actually directly needs to do anything for this. Rollout, so a rapid release and scheduled release is available right now for all Google Workspace customers.
That's fantastic. That's a nice simple rollout and update for everybody. What have we got next there, Adam?
So next up, we have a Google Calendar update. So improving calendar interoperability. When working across locations and time zones, calendar functionality is vital for you to connect effectively and meaningfully with others. Calendar interoperability is the critical component to help ensure events created in one calendar system are accurately propagated for guests using different calendar systems. This allows you to productively schedule time and manage your schedule collaboratively, regardless of your calendaring platform. Google is excited to announce recent improvements to calendar interoperability. So, Microsoft Outlook users who also have a Google Calendar with the same email address can receive Google Calendar invitations and RSVPs in Outlook. A default meeting reminder will be generated in Microsoft Outlook if the invitation was created in Google Calendar to help make sure guests using Outlook do not miss events, and non-Google Calendar recurring events will be more systematically and accurately updated in Google Calendar. So when I first saw this update, I was like, oh, great. Google Calendar is going to work within Outlook, because Microsoft Outlook is a very popular mail client for lots of our customers. And I know one of the barriers that it's just been noted before that when they've tried to access their Google Calendar through Outlook, it doesn't work. It doesn't sync both ways. I think you can have it one way but not the other. It didn't really work. So I thought this update fixes that, but it doesn't quite seem the case. So it's just more of to do with the notification. So then if you receive an email, if you're RSVPing to an event that was sent from Google Calendar, it's not, you can just access Google Calendar within Outlook.
Right, okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Adam, because that was exactly what I was thinking as well when you're going through
And
this.
hoping it was going to be. That's what I was hoping it was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get it. I know that none of these tech companies really like each other. You know, Google wants you to use Google Calendar in Chrome, and they don't want you to use Outlook, and Microsoft doesn't want you to use Google Calendar. So none of them have got a vested interest to make it work with the other platform. I do wish that sometimes they would think a little bit more about the customer and about the user experience, especially for those users who don't understand technology and don't get on with technology very well, which I really do think that Google, I think every tech company really falls into the trap of not really understanding how much some people are technophobes and how much some people really do struggle with technology. So I would have liked to have seen them make it a little bit easier with Outlook, because I echo what you said, Adam, that it really, technically it does work with Outlook, but we found ourselves, it is very hit and miss as to whether it works gracefully and whether it works well and reliably and consistently. The counter to that, I would say, is sometimes it isn't one side. You know, like Google might be fully willing to make it work really well with Outlook, but there might be some kind of restriction on Outlook which prevents that happening. And
Or
we do
equally
need
the
to
other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do need to keep in mind as well that there are so many different versions of Outlook. You know, you got Outlook, obviously 2010 and 2013 and 2019. So
16, 365 options.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different versions out there that people might be using. So I understand it's a difficult challenge, but you know, it's good that the RSVP part has been tweaked and made to work a bit better. Funnily enough, that actually came up with a customer recently, actually, where I sent them an event and that exact thing happened. It came through to their Outlook, but they weren't able to kind of accept it very easily. So that's good to see.
It happens to me. I mentioned it in our team meeting where somebody had scheduled an event for us in a couple of weeks' time, and he said, "Oh, just RSVP on the event." But so I use Mac Mail. There was no RSVP within Mac Mail. I opened up Gmail, and there was the RSVP. So this is kind of similar, but instead of Outlook, Mac Mail. So again, that's a totally different version of Outlook if you are using that. Outlook for Mac, and all the other different versions as well. I use Mac Mail, and I did not receive an RSVP from an event. I don't know if it was created within Google Calendar or where it... Actually, yeah, it came from Zoom, didn't it? Not Google Calendar.
Yeah.
But... yeah, there was no RSVP available for me. So this update just kind of says that if you are using Outlook and somebody does send you something that is from Google Calendar, you are able to RSVP directly within Outlook. So that makes the thing a lot easier for them.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. How do people get started with this? What's the rollout pace and availability here, please?
Okay, so for admins and end users, there's no action required. You'll automatically see these updates. But if you want to view availability of users in Microsoft Outlook and book rooms, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about Calendar Interop. And I've added a link in our document that you'll find in our description of this podcast.
Great. And what's the rollout pace here and availability, Adam?
So this feature is available right now for everyone, which is great to see, and this is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers, and this is also going to be available to users with a personal Google account. So love to see it straight across the board, available to everyone. And right now.
Yeah, fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. What's the next update that we got here?
Okay, next up we have our first Google Doc update. So you can now easily expand and collapse content in Google Docs. So Google is introducing a new feature that helps you minimize and expand sections within Google Docs. This collapsible heading function makes it easier to consume content by enabling you to hide portions of larger documents more easily. And to be honest, I think the easiest way to understand what this update is happening, have a look at our document, because I've added a lovely graphic in there for everybody that I stole from Google, which just clearly demonstrates what is happening here. So this highly requested feature helps you create and consume more digestible content in docs. Editors of a document will have the ability to set the default state of headers to expanded or collapsed for all users. Users with view and comment access are able to expand and collapse content when they have the document open, and when they close their document, the expand collapse changes will not be saved.
Okay, that's nice that they've clarified when it's sort of going to save the expansion and collapsion. Collapsion? That's not a word. The expansion and collapsing of those sections. So that's good that they've sort of clarified that a little bit there. Adam's absolutely right. Have a little look at the document, because the moving graphic shows you very, very clearly how this works. For anybody who's got kind of visibility issues, or anybody who just wants it described on the podcast, I'll do my best. The example that they've given is a to-do list, and the headings are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the days of the week. And underneath the headings, they've got checklists of things to do with kind of checkboxes. And just as a side note, something that's so nice about Google Docs, and this is a real example of how Google thinks about how people use these features. When you put in a list with checkboxes, I don't know if anybody's particularly noticed this, I think it's so nice that when you tick off the item, it automatically crosses through, it like strikes out the text.
I just noticed that. Actually, you know what, that is quite nice.
Yeah, it's a really, really nice feature. I think the update came out before we started doing this podcast. And we're actually going to talk a bit later about another update that came out before we did the podcast, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But it's a really, really nice little thing. So, yeah, have a little look at the moving graphic there if you're able to, because it really does explain it extremely clearly. But I think Adam's done a very good job there of covering that as well.
So I really like this update. I think this is great. And as soon as I have access to it, I'm definitely going to use this. I think it's going to be really handy for everybody, just to be able to expand and collapse things. Just so it makes things nice and neat. So it's nice. It's almost like a file structure, really, where you can just collapse your files and folders. The one thing that I've noticed about this, and Google haven't clarified one way or another, because in the example that's given, it is a list, so it's almost as if something that would have had bullet points or numbered, then that can become collapsible. So I don't know can you make just a standard paragraph collapsible or not, or would it have to be something in place where you have added your bullet points or some form of list?
I don't think so. I think this is sort of for anything. I think you can just make a header collapsible effectively. And
I would like to think that they would have specified if it was only for a list, but because in the example that's given it within the graphic, it is just a list, I just wasn't sure if there are limitations within that. So as I say, as soon as this becomes available, I'm going to have a play, because I would actually intend on using that on our document that we link in our podcast anyway, because I think that would be one example where it could just be really handy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, just have all of the updates there, and then people can see at a glance what they want to look at and expand the section. Yeah,
precisely.
Very good point, Adam.
Yeah,
absolutely. And with Google's pageless feature as well, you don't even have to worry about page breaks or multiple pages. Great. Okay, how do people get started with this? What's the rollout pace and availability here, Adam?
Okay, so to get started with this, for the admins, there's no admin control for this feature. For the end users, you can visit Google's Help Center to learn more about adding a title, heading, or table of contents in a document, and I've added a link to that within our podcast. Rollout, so a rapid release, there is a gradual rollout, so up to 15 days for visibility, which started on May the 16th. Scheduled release, gradual rollout, which is starting on May 30th. And this is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers. This is also going to be available to users with a personal Google account.
Yeah, makes sense. These little sort of tweaks to Docs are always sort of available across the board. Thank you, Adam. I think we've got another Google Docs one next, haven't we?
That's right. So next up is another Google Docs update. So you can now create custom building blocks in Google Docs. So Google is introducing custom building blocks in Google Docs. One of the latest innovations in Smart Canvas, which we've mentioned just once or twice, that brings people and data into a single workflow to save time and keep you focused. This feature enables you to save custom blocks of text, tables, and chips to build reusable components. For example, you might create a project kickoff template to track milestones and tasks, the project launch checklist, or even a block of code of text that's commonly used within your organization. Rather than reworking the out-of-the-box building blocks to meet your specific needs or search for a template that you frequently copy and paste into a doc, you can save that snippet of the entire document as a custom building block and easily insert the content into other documents. So the example that's within the document that Google gave is, again, it looks like there's a task list and somebody has just highlighted the entire table, and that they have saved that as a building block. So then the next time that they want to insert the same table that looks exactly the same formatting and everything, they can very easily add that in again instead of even having to manually do it or go back and find one to copy and paste. So I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, these it looks really nice from the example that you've given here, and it's just another form of template, really. It's just that it's within Smart Canvas rather than it being an entire document. I can't think of any immediate uses that we're going to have for this specific feature, but I think it is very useful and very, very good. And it's just another example of how Google are de-siloing. I know they like to use that term, siloing. They're sort of de-siloing these experiences within the workplace. So traditionally, obviously, when people would create this stuff, it would all be very isolated and, as Google says, siloed just to them. Now they can create this stuff and share it across the organization so easily and distribute it to their colleagues so easily. So I think this is very, very nice. Maybe you're going to go in a bit about the getting started with this, but I can, just looking ahead here, Adam, I can see there's no admin control for this feature. That would immediately be my only concern about how you would keep control in a large organisation of these custom building blocks and how they kind of get shared out. I'll let you read the getting started and maybe that will become clear.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you mentioned that because I was thinking something similar. Okay, so to get started for the end users, well, you mentioned there's no admin control, but for the end users, to create custom building blocks, you can select any part of a document that you have access to copy from, right-click and select Save as Custom Building Block, give it a name, and then click Save. Just a note on that, custom building blocks are saved as documents in your Google Drive in a folder called Custom Building Blocks, which is automatically generated. So that's very similar. If you record a meeting, Google will automatically create a folder to save it in. If you have access to Google Classroom, it will create a folder to save content for your Google Classroom in there. So a auto-generated folder called Custom Building Blocks will be made, and that is where this content will be saved. So within that folder, that is where you can reorganize, edit, and delete those documents as you wish. To insert the custom building block in a document, you can type @ followed by the name of your block. Hit enter or scroll down to building blocks, then select the name of your building block. So you mentioned about how other people within your organization might be able to have access to this, and that's something I wondered myself, because if you then say share that document that is auto generated with other people within your organization, does that mean that they will have access to your building blocks, or are they unique to you?
I think they're unique to you for now. I wouldn't be surprised if Google does an update to this where, they introduce an admin control. So that was my misunderstanding of this, in the fact that I was talking about de-siloing. It's not, because this is just for you to use yourself. Maybe Google will do an update so that you can collaborate and share these building blocks and put them, kind of like how you can submit a template to the template gallery and it goes to a central place. Maybe there'll be an update in the future where you can submit a building block to the building block gallery. Maybe Google will do something along those lines, which would be really nice to see. And then there'll be some kind of admin control over that. For now, it looks like it's just for individuals. But even without being able to share it to your colleagues, I still think it's really lovely for you to be able to use this even for yourself and reuse those building blocks. I think that's a really nice thing. When I said I can't think of a use case for us, it's not because it's anything wrong with the feature. It's just we already have quite strong template gallery, and we have quite limited documents we use.
I was actually just thinking something similar. So initially I was like, great, this will be super helpful for lots of people that that use Google Docs quite a lot. I'm sure people kind of rinse and repeat the same sort of formula for whether it's tables or whatever they're doing within Docs. So I think this feature would be really helpful. But then I just kind of thought, as we were going through this, well then if you use it that often, you just have a template.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's kind of really geared up for people who the thing is, with the templates that we've got, they're very much independent templates for an entire document creation. So for example, we've got a general document template which just has our logo in. That's if you want to just write a document right now. Then we've got a SOP or a KB template. Then we've got a meeting minutes template. Those are very much templates that you would call up, write it, and it's got very much a directed purpose. I think this Smart Canvas template sort of feature is good because it's where you're writing a document and you want to put those little modules in, like in this case, those little smart canvases in.
Yeah, so I guess one example of something that this could be very, very helpful for would be if you wanted to create a table, but have specific formatting for that table. So, for example, what's very common across all of our schools, report writing. They want the table to have to be a fixed size, so they can't change it, or it's a certain colour, or it looks a certain way. So then instead of having to faff about essentially, or as we kind of mentioned, go find an old document, copy a bit of that, delete the bits that you don't need. So you could kind of create a template for a table, but with the correct formatting that you want to use, have it saved, so then you don't really need to recall any previous information as to how you got it to work the way that you want it. So then just have it saved within Smart Canvas, and then you can quickly throw it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or you might create like a contents page as a building block. You know, it might be quite a good sort of thing that you don't want to use it. You don't want a template document for it, but you just want it to be like a template module, so that you're putting into different types of documents. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam. What's the rollout pace here and availability then?
Okay, so rapid release, there is a gradual rollout, so up to 15 days, which started on May the 16th. Scheduled release, there's also a gradual rollout, which is starting on June the 5th. This update is going to be available to Google Workspace Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Plus, customers, and also non-profit. So it will not be available to anybody else. It's just going to be available to those customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of that typical thing we've seen of these slightly more advanced features, like these custom building blocks and things, being available on the slightly higher tier there. Interesting that they've only made it available on Education to Education Plus customers, not like Teaching and Learning Upgrade and things like that. So that might be because they just think that schools aren't maybe going to use this feature that much. Which they might not do. I think it's a real tragedy, to be honest, not just in education, but in our world generally, of the fact that there are so many fantastic things that people could do in computers, in whether it's especially in Google Docs and Google Workspace. There's so many things, there's so many features and so many systems that they could use to make their lives easier, so that they're not repeating things, so they're not repeating information. They just don't know how to access them. It's such a shame, something that we observe all the time. You know, I'm sure you've seen it before, Adam, where you've seen a staff member doing something that's taken them an hour, and you just go, no, do this, this and this, and the task is done in about 2 minutes. It's like because we just know how to use templates, shortcuts, or whatever to accomplish those tasks so much quicker. So I wish you could kind of just put that knowledge into somebody's head, in an easier way.
Yeah, well, I had that exact thing. I think it was yesterday, actually. One of the admin staff at one of our schools was showing us, or we were discussing a process that they come in over the summer holidays and spend an entire day doing something. I showed them how they could do it with one singular click of their mouse.
Wow, that's incredible.
Boom. Oh, look, I just saved you a day.
Yeah, it's just amazing, isn't it? It's quite incredible. I remember the one that I had that was similar, where somebody. This is quite a long time ago. To just keep in mind, I had somebody who I went in and they had a spreadsheet printed out in A3 and a guillotine, and they were cutting out students with information into little strips, and then sticking them on a piece of paper. And I just said, can I just ask what you're doing? And they said, yeah, I'm alphabetizing this spreadsheet. I just went, right, just stop. And they said, no, I've got to get it done by the end of the day. I said, just please stop. I said, and it's similar to you. I just went, we just click here and click A to Z. Done. You can just print it now. It's alphabetized. So I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast who will just be going, what? But this is what I said earlier about some people. They just don't have this understanding in IT, and it's one of the reasons that we've done this podcast, right? Is to try and get, okay, this is higher level information, but if we get this out to you guys listening, whether you're administrators or whether you're users or whatever level you're at, if we can get these updates out to you, then you can tell your colleagues about them, you can tell your customers about them, or whatever, that you might not have had time to read up on them. But anyway, that's enough of me going off on a tangent, because I said I wouldn't go off on a tangent.
We're not doing that.
What is the next update, please, Adam?
Okay, next up we have a Google Chat update. So you can now react to messages quickly in Google Chat. So last year, Google made it easier for you to access your most used emojis within Google Chat. Building upon this, they're adding quick reactions in chat, which displays your most frequently used emojis to hover over a message. You'll also see options to open the full emoji picker, reply in a thread, and also a quote in reply, and more.
Yeah, this is very nice to just sort of do that quick reaction, which people are used to doing now. They're used to doing that in WhatsApp and iMessage and things like that. And it's very nice. Again, on the graphic here, it shows you very simply how it just sort of pops up and you can click on it. It's quite funny, actually, because I think there was a thing I heard on a radio show or something a while ago about people sending in their emoji screen, because it was when that first sort of started appearing in Android and iPhone, where it would put your most frequently used emojis, and it's quite funny. You can almost tell somebody's personality by
I was
the
just
most
thinking that. It's like, does everybody want to disclose that information?
Yeah, exactly. It was like I remember there were a couple of people who messaged in, and it was like, one was their most frequently used emotion was like the sass, like the girl sass thing, and the other one was like, I don't know, a glass of wine or something like that. Yeah, it's quite revealing to your personality as to what your most frequently used emojis are. Thank you, Adam. What's the getting started rollout pace and availability here?
Okay, so to get started with this, for the admins, there is no admin control for this feature. I'm not sure we've had any admin control for any of the updates so far today. There must have been for pool storage. For the end users, you'll notice this improvement automatically when using emojis in Google Chat, on the web, and on the latest version of Android. To use quick reactions, hover over or long press on a message. Notice that there's no mention of iOS devices. However, I did have a very quick look on my phone. I use iOS, and it's very similar. So at the moment, you can long press on a message, and there's the option to add a reaction to that, and then you can kind of go and find your emoji. So it doesn't look like this is excluding iOS, but it's not quite an instant reaction in the same way that this update is alluding to. Rollout, so rapid release domains, gradual rollout, which is up to 15 days for visibility, started on May the 16th. Scheduled release, again, gradual rollout, is starting on May the 30th. This update is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers, as well as legacy G Suite Basic and Business customers, and this is also available to users with a personal Google account.
Google Chat's so generous with their updates. They're always just making them available to everybody, including the personal customers. They just love to put the personal customers in there for Google Chat. It's so funny. Thank you, Adam. Nice to see that across the board. What's the next update that we've got, please?
Okay, next up, it's a podcast first for us. We have an update to do with the Alert Center, and I don't think we've had any updates related to that before, so here we go. So you can now monitor abuse-related events in the Alert Center. So admins will now receive alerts related to abuse-related events in their organization. This includes events related to content that has been marked abusive or user access restrictions to apps. This update makes it easier for admins to stay on top of abuse within their accounts and easily take necessary action, such as suspending users or restricting access to certain services.
Very interesting update. I mean, it's great, good that there's a system there that's specifically looking at abuse in the Alert Center, and anything that does this for admins where at a glance you can see something happening. We actually had it happen within Strawberry 7 recently, where I actually got a ping from our Alert Center where it said, oh, hey, Gary has reported tons of spam and like phishing emails. You might want to look at that. And I thought, that's weird. I've never had that before. So I went into the alert. We've had it for the schools and things all the time. But I went into the Alert Center and had a look. And it said like, oh, we'd reported 86 messages or something like that. And I spoke to Gary about it. And what happened was all he'd done was he had just selected a whole load of messages and moved them to the junk folder by accident. He'd accidentally moved them there. And of course, Google had pinged through and gone, oh my God, and that's what it meant by the reporting, was the fact that those emails have been moved to the junk folder. That's what it took as reporting. So it's a good educational experience for me to see that in action. And that's what I think they'll be talking about with this reporting here, is it's not necessarily a specific thing where you're saying, oh, this is abusive, but there'll be some kind of action that you'll do on the message that it will then interpret that as abusive. There might be a report abuse button. They don't kind of go into details about it.
That's really interesting, because I kind of thought that it was the other way, as if somebody receives an email and they say, no, this is spam or this is abusive, and then you would then receive an email about this. So probably a lot, again, I was thinking it would be a lot more relevant for larger organizations where users may not necessarily just have a face-to-face conversation with something. So you can't just say, stop sending me that silly email or whatever. So then they end up reporting it as abusive, and then an admin can see, oh, this one user is sending lots of spam to another user or something along those lines. But it's very interesting to say that is not the case, and it's actually when emails have gone into a spam folder, then you're getting reports that way. So I think that would actually make it a lot easier and a bit more practical, and also relevant to a lot more organisations as well, including us. We're small.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to be clear, that was sort of like phishing alerts and things like that, not necessarily these abuse alerts that they're talking about here. I mean, we're going to go down a bit into the getting started, so maybe it will allude a bit more to how these alerts are going to kind of come through, because I'm just wondering what action the user takes to report this, and it does say there's no end user action, so I'm guessing that it's like the phishing thing. It's looking more for patterns in how people are interacting with these messages and things like that. The other thing that this might be referencing to is I think it was our last episode where we just had that one update, which was about the new kind of junk area or spam reporting area in Google Drive, so it might be reference to that as well.
That's a very good point, actually. So everybody can listen to last week's episode for more information about that particular update. But that is a very good link and relevant. So that is very interesting. Also, just kind of picked out. So Google said that this is kind of specific to content that has been marked abusive. Whereas, is it going to mention how exactly does one mark something as abusive?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm wondering, is how it gets if it's like the other Google systems, like the phishing one, it will kind of look at patterns and activity and it will determine what is abusive or what it thinks is abusive. Maybe that's a user deleting a lot of messages from another particular user, or blocking another user, or maybe it's even going to look at the content of the messages. But I wouldn't have thought Google would do that, because that's sort of getting a bit into invasion of privacy. So I wouldn't have thought Google would go down that route. Maybe could you give us the getting started, Adam? Maybe that'll give us a bit more information about this.
Okay, so for the admins with the Alert Center privilege will see these notifications in the Alert Center. Primary admins will also receive notifications via email. You can visit Google's Help Center to learn about configuring who should receive email alerts, the Alert Center, and viewing alert details and admin audit logs. Links for all of those are in the podcast, in the document within the podcast description. And as Adam mentioned, there is no end user action required. So Google haven't actually really specified here what somebody needs to do in order to mark something as abusive.
No, they haven't gone in too much about that. I think it's going to be some kind of auto scanning that it's going to pick up on that. So interesting to know what the criteria is going to be for it to think that something's abusive. Thank you, Adam. What's the rollout pace here and availability?
Okay, so rapid release and scheduled release. This is available right now, and this is available to all Google Workspace customers. So apparently that includes users with a personal Google account. Do users with a personal Google account have access to the Alert Center? Because this kind of alludes to more of an admin update, really. So you kind of would have thought that you need access to the admin console to do that, and that's not everybody.
No, that's a very good point, Adam. Yeah, absolutely. No, it can't be the personal Google accounts because, like you say, they don't have the admin center. So, and also they won't have. They're not in a business environment, so they won't have colleagues that are reporting abuse and things like that. So, yeah, a little bit strange that they've put that in. And to be totally honest with you, a bit strange that it would even be available to all of the different business tiers, because I think you're right that the Alert Center. I think I'm thinking more of the security health dashboards and the quick access dashboards there. I think the Alert Center is available to everybody. I'm thinking more of the more advanced security health dashboards. Maybe they mean all sort of business type tiers and education tiers that have the admin center. But yes, thank you, Adam. What's the next update, please?
So next up, we have a Google Sheets update. So you can now complete data-driven tasks faster with new Smartship data extraction in Google Sheets. In continuing Google's efforts to help you deliver more with Smart Canvas, they recently introduced additional Smartship functionality in Google Sheets. Building upon this, you'll also be able to quickly extract information from Smartships for advanced sorting, filtering, and analysis to drive your projects forward. With Smartship data extraction, you can enrich your sheets with information from people, file, and event chips. More specifically, this feature allows you to pull out metadata associated with specific Smartships into its own cell, while maintaining a connection with the chip it was extracted from. For example, if you need to keep track of a set of documents, their owners and details, such as creation time or who last modified the file, you can do so by extracting those fields from the relevant file chip. And I've added, within the document in the podcast description, there is an example that shows you that. You can keep your extractions up to date by navigating to the Refresh and Manage section of the extraction sidebar to update your data and reflect the latest changes. Smartship data extraction allows you to track and organize data more easily and also perform deeper analysis using data that is derived from Smartships. Useful actions include using file chips to understand when a document was last updated, or using people chips to sort and filter employees based on job location to best delegate region-specific tasks. You can also nest arrays of chip extractions to perform more complex analyses. The example within the document uses a range of people chips to count the number of unique office locations for 9 different individuals, and an example formula extraction across the range of people chips, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. The document definitely has a moving graphic in here that shows this in action very effectively. We said before the podcast, I said to Adam, I said, wow, people must do some really kind of like niche things with Google Sheets and chips, smart chips. Certainly nothing that we ever get involved in or do ourselves within our organisation. To sort of make use of this feature, or for this feature to have even been suggested. But looking at this feature and hearing what you've said there, Adam, it's very, very cool. I mean, especially in the fact that it keeps updated. That's very useful.
Well, it sounds like you would need to click on the refresh button to update it, but the links should stay live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even having to click on the refresh button, it's still very, very useful that you can keep that updated. It's another one of those examples of how you can combine these different parts of Google together. You know, I can imagine that you'll create. So what's happening here is, for anybody who's sort of not quite clear, in the example that I've given here, there's documents that have been created. So let's say it's a slideshow. I think there's a couple of spreadsheets and a document here as an example. Then what's happened is in a Google Sheet, somebody has put a smart chip that's essentially linking to each of those documents. So the spreadsheet is in one cell as a smart chip, the other spreadsheet is in another cell as a smart chip, the doc is in the next one, etc. Then they've performed a data extraction, and that's what this update is, the data extraction on those smart chips to say, right, show me the owner of the slideshow, show me the creation date of the slideshow, etc. And those are the things that auto-update. So that's really cool in its own. And then I should imagine you could kind of go beyond that as well to then, I don't know, have that data feeding somewhere else or going somewhere else and sort of doing something on that. So I think it's very, very good for analysis, and like it says there about kind of looking at maybe where people are in order to get a better idea of how to allocate documents to them and things like that. I can imagine some interesting use cases of this.
Yeah, but I think this update, it's kind of cool. It's always quite exciting to kind of let's just push IT just a little bit further and see what we can do with it. I'm struggling to think a little bit in how the real world applications of how beneficial this would be, but I'm with all of the updates, I'm sure they're very helpful to somebody. I'm not sure this specific update will be super helpful for me, and so therefore I'm kind of struggling to see just how useful this update could actually be for everyone else as well. I guess maybe I'm trying to think, teachers or somebody, if you're just wanting to know, oh, has this person updated this document yet? So maybe within your team, people have various tasks and they all need to work on a set document by a set date or something along those lines. Instead of having to go to the individual locations of those files and having a look, oh, when was the last time this file was updated or something like this, you can view all of those files within a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example, actually, Adam. I mean, if I was a teacher, I could create a smart chip for each of the documents that my students had created, and then I could highlight them all and say creation time. And then you could get an idea of who's jumping on their homework early and who's leaving it until 10 minutes before the lesson or something like that. So I think that's an excellent example that you've given there, Adam, of being able to extract that data there. What's the getting started on this? There's quite a lot for the end user here, isn't there? So I'll let you run through that.
There is a little bit, but for the admins, it's super easy because there's no admin control for this feature. But for the end user, so to perform sidebar extraction, Open the data extraction sidebar via either the data menu, right-clicking on the cell or range with people, event or file chips and navigating to data extractions, or clicking on the data extractions link in people, event or file hovercards. Select the range that contains the chips that you want to extract data from. Choose what data you want to extract from the selected chips. Pick the range where you want the data to be extracted to. So that makes sense. To perform formula extraction, you can start by typing equals in a cell where you want the information extracted, navigate to the cell or range with the chip in them and select it, add a period after the cell or range of cells and choose from the autocomplete what to extract. So for us in the UK, that's add a full stop after the range. Accept the dialog confirming what will be extracted. To refresh data in the data extraction sidebar, open the extraction sidebar, click refresh and manage, find the smart chips data you want to refresh, click refresh data. To refresh all smart chips data, click refresh all at the bottom of the sidebar. And you can also visit Google's Help Center to learn more about extracting data from smart chips within your Google Sheets. Link in the document.
Fantastic. That's great, and it's nice that they put a refresh all button in there as well. That's really useful. What's the rollout pace and availability here?
Okay, so rapid release, which is an extended rollout, started on May the 17th. Scheduled release, which is a gradual rollout, is starting on June the 14th. So availability, so the extraction of data already stored in chips is going to be available to all Google Workspace customers and users with a personal Google account. The extraction of all available data is going to not be available to Essentials Starter, Business Starter, Frontline Starter, Frontline Standard and Non-Profits, and is also not available to users with a personal Google account, but will be available to the other tiers.
Interesting. I think that's the first time we've ever seen, certainly on this podcast anyway, we've ever seen a update where the update itself has two it's split out to two different tiers of what you can do with the update. So like Adam says there's if you want to extract data already stored in the chips, that's available to everybody. But if you want to extract all data, then that's only available to select customers. And Adam said who it's not available therefore, because it's a much shorter list. Thank you, Adam. What have we got next? I think this is our last update, isn't it?
That's right. So last update from us this week is to do with Google Calendar and Docs. So you can now collaborate with others on Google Calendar invites within Google Docs. So following Google's most recent innovations in Smart Canvas, which we've mentioned only once or twice, with custom building blocks and collapsible headings, see earlier on in the podcast, in Google Docs, they're adding a building block that lets you collaborate with others to draft calendar invites. This can be useful when several stakeholders have inputs for dates, times, attendees, events descriptions, or more, similar to the email draft templates that Google announced March 2022. Once the invitation is complete, simply click the calendar icon and pull the details into Google Calendar when you're ready to send.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not an update that we would use within Strawberry 7, but I can imagine that this would be super helpful in the right organisation. I think that there are some use cases for this, definitely where you're in a larger organisation, you're in a events team maybe, or something like that, and you're wanting to collaborate on these events. And I'm sure that there's somebody out there who's thinking, yes, finally we're gonna be able to more easily collaborate on calendar events, so that you're not having to live in email with that, and you're not emailing each other backwards and forwards. Oh, should we do it on what date? Should we do it, guys? And then you receive 5 emails from your colleagues saying, oh, maybe we can do it on this date, maybe we can do it on this date. Instead, you're just using this template in Smart Canvas, and you're all kind of making tweaks and changes within it. So I think it would be very useful for certain people. The only thing is, and we were talking about this before we recorded, Adam and I aren't clear, because it's not very clear in the update here, we're not entirely clear how the notification works. So what I mean by that is, let's say it was myself, Adam and Gary all making this calendar entry. Let's say I created it in Google Docs. I assume I would have to notify you over chat or something like that, and kind of obviously you'd have to be able to access the document. But then I don't know quite how... For example, if Gary wanted to suggest 4 dates, is he able to do that in this building block? Or is that just beyond the functionality of it? Can he only just change the date? And then if he changes the date, do I get notified about it? And do you get notified about it, Adam? Yeah, it doesn't go into that many details about that aspect of it, does it?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe you need to add a comment within the Google Doc to do that. So when I first saw this update come through, I thought, okay, we're going into Google Workspace Inception. Once again, it's now
Yeah.
Google Calendar inside Google Docs, but it's not quite as complicated as I thought it was going to be. So it's literally creating a Google event, but you do it as a template within Google Docs. That's pretty much all it is. I wonder, would it be easier... Do we like that it's within Google Docs, or should you be able to just create the draft within Google Calendar and you just don't publish it or something until ready? So if it's within a shared calendar, then you have like your draft calendar event there. I could also see how this could potentially be quite helpful. Say maybe you're planning a business trip or a weekend away or whatever, and so instead of just having all of the information inside one Google Calendar, you have your Google Doc of your itinerary, where you're going and what you're doing, and at the bottom, at the top, wherever you want it to be, you can add the Google Calendar event as a template, or sorry, as a draft, because it's not quite ready. So it's there for when you have finalized all the details, and then you can click the button, and then it goes off into your Google Calendar, and it is then published.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you bring up, Adam. I mean, if it had been me, Google are obviously infinitely more smarter than me, case proved by that sentence that I just said. But the point is that I think you've hit on an interesting use case there of doing it in Google Calendar, and that's kind of how I would have made it if somebody gave me this task of making this. Personally, I would have added a new collaborator area in Google Calendar. So what it would have been is you make the event exactly the same as you make it, but you have maybe 2 options. You have a box that you can tick maybe, or a new category of event that you can create where you create it as a draft. You create a draft event. So that's the first thing. And then when you add people in as guests, you can select whether they're a guest or a collaborator on the event. And then when you're changing things, you can kind of, when you click save, it says, hey, do you want me to tell the collaborators about the changes that you've made? Exactly the same as you were saying before we recorded, Adam, about when you have an event with guests in and you make a change to the time, it says, hey, do you want me to notify the guests? Do you want me to email the guests and tell them about it?
Yes, or I just had another thought where if it was within Calendar, I could see a use. So, for example, you create your draft event, add somebody as a collaborator, but you maybe you leave off the date and the time. So you can say, I want to have a meeting with you, but you're a collaborator, send it off to them. So they can then select the date and time when they're available, but they're only allowed to select a date and time when you're also available based on your Google Calendar. So they can't see the rest of your calendar, so they don't know what you're doing, but they only have the options to select a time to meet with you on a time when you are actually free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think this is sort of a different thing. This is more lots of people creating an event for something else, or for somebody else. And to be fair, Google do have some mechanisms for what you describe, because you can sort of see when people are free and busy, and also you can create the appointment scheduler, which we talked about in one of our previous podcasts at some point, where you can create a whole load of sort of schedules, kind of like Google's version of Calendly, and people can go in and book appointments with you. I think this is a good update. Again, I don't think we're going to use it, But what I was saying earlier about this was the update where I was talking about something that happened before we started recording this podcast, was the email drafts template. Because I said to Adam, I said, I don't remember seeing about an email drafts template, but it actually happened, as Adam said, back in March 22, so it's before we started recording. And that is a very similar thing where you can all collaborate together on an email in Google Docs, like an email template in Google Docs. You can all collaborate, write the email collaboratively, and then I guess send it straight out very easily. So you might be thinking to yourself, why couldn't you just do that in a Google Doc? You can, it is within a Google Doc, but it's just kind of giving you a building block so that you've got an area to say who it's to and the subject and the content, and then you can one click kind of send it to your email. I believe that's what you can do with the draft template.
I just had a thought as you were saying that, but I guess it does kind of apply to this calendar event, a calendar update as well. When you send it, who does the invitation come from? Would it be the owner of the document?
I think it's whoever copies it to the calendar. Whoever clicks that copy to calendar button, that's whose calendar it goes to, and therefore the creator of the event, if you like.
Okay. Oh, I see. So you don't. I just had a realization how this probably actually works. But when you click the button to add it into your calendar, it doesn't just go boom, there it is in your calendar. It will just populate it within Google Calendar, and then you probably press save or send something. So similar with the email, because I was actually thinking, well, with the email template draft, once you've finished drafting your email, if you click send, but several people were working on the document at the same time, who does the email actually come from? It probably doesn't actually just immediately send an email. It probably brings it up in Gmail, populates the email, and you just have to click send. And obviously, if you're sending it, then it's from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it's the same with this calendar. It will kind of take it over to your calendar, and then you can save it. And if you've added guests, for example, it will then email them out and things like that. Thank you, Adam. How do people get started with this? What's the rollout and the availability here?
Okay, so once again, there's no admin control for this feature, but for the end users, you must have edit access to a Google Doc to use this feature. Simply open a document, type followed by calendar event draft, and then hit enter. You can also go to Insert, Building Blocks, and then Calendar Event Draft. Availability, so rapid release, there's a gradual rollout for this, which started on May the 17th. Scheduled release for this, gradual rollout, which is starting on May the 30th. And availability, this is going to be available to Google Workspace Business Standard, Business Plus, Enterprise Standard, Enterprise Plus, Education Plus customers, and also non-profits, but it will not be available to the other tiers.
Excellent. That's fantastic, Adam. Thank you very much. You see, I told you we wouldn't go too much off on a tangent, and I think we've managed that. It's only about an hour and 20 minutes, so that's we've done pretty well there, I think. Well, hopefully that was there was a lot to get through. There was a lot to get through, and there were some really nice updates in there to do with Google Docs. Those Google Docs updates and Sheets updates and things, very, very nice. I really, really like those. Well, that's it, everybody. That's everything that you need to know that's happening this week in the world of Google Workspace. Remember that this podcast is available from your regular podcast provider and also in video format on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/strawberry7. If you haven't done so already, please share this with your colleagues. Please leave us a lovely review. We always like to hear from our listeners. Thank you very much for joining us this week.
We'll be back again next week with more updates.
Goodbye.
Bye.